show is writers, readers, drinkers, lend me your ears and your livers. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar, the only show on the internet bold enough to proclaim that it's fun to play with stakes while drinking, though you may lose an eye, poke an eye out. I am your host and resident object lesson who still has both eyes for some unimaginable reason, William R. Hensey. And I am really delighted to finally introduce these very patient, though dangerous folks. Panel, welcome so much to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
It's funny, you said steaks, and in my head, it was a piece of meat. So
That's true. It's hard to say. I mean, I guess like you can also play with those sticks. It's you pat them out like a pizza or something. I'm not sure what the possibilities are, but awesome. So I want to get to the show proper. So anyone that did join us before, we had terrible technical difficulties, and I'm completely frazzled now and will not be able to continue on with any coherence, but we are going to march on one way or the other because I've never been known for my coherence anyways. But we are going to be talking stakes today, but let's meet everyone. And in typical, open bar fashion, I will include just, bios for everyone in the description, but I like to have some fun with it. So, first off, I did want to say, so a couple quick announcements for anyone tuning in. One is we will be starting to do these open bars every second Wednesday of the month. They will be live. We'll get it down to where they actually start at the correct live time at some point, but we'll be doing these at least every second Wednesday of the month, 4 p.m. Pacific time where I am, 7 p.m. Eastern if you're on the East Coast, and everyone else in the world will have to figure out their times. 5 p.m. for Sue, because I know you're Mountain time, so we'll also get Mountain time for everybody here.
Kuala
so
Lumpur.
we will be doing these.
When
live.
Is it on in Kuala Lumpur? Do you know?
Kuala Lumpur. Maybe you can look that up.
Kidding.
Also, we now have a member section on the YouTube box. So if anyone is interested, you can go on there. I have all of the shows. If you've ever watched them, I have these recorded out 6-7 months in advance. There's actually 10 shows that have already been recorded that are now available to all the members. So there's fun membership things called Tequila Mockingbird, Huckleberry Gin. And if you're crazy and really want to buy me a bottle of whiskey, you can join the Whiskey Rebellion. And we'll be rolling those out more as we go along. And I want to start getting to where I actually record the shows live, but I will have to figure out the mechanics of how that works before we roll all the way there. And if you are there, I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat. I am a man over 40, so the working with the technology clearly isn't my strong suit. But we will try to keep the chat here into the show. I am to save time in the chat to ask questions. So. But feel free to join in as we go. I'll try to kind of get your feedback in, your questions in as we're rolling along from there. So now let's get to the introductions because I was very excited about this. I made sure that not only did I have a game or something fun ready for us to introduce everyone, I had a brilliant moniker for everyone here. So I'm really excited here. Let's start with Sue O'Connor, the Chonkla Sniper. Sue, I knew you were going to like your name the most. That's why I started there. They're going to start slowly. They're going to dwindle here. So I like to have some fun with it here. What did I say I was going to do with this today? So would you rather, the timeless would you rather game here. So would you rather be a character in a Bram Stoker Dracula, so Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, or get it stakes. I'm just pounding the stakes. And there is in fact a meat stakes joke later. John, you stole my thunder with that one.
Spoiler.
Would you rather be a character in Bram Stoker's Dracula or in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five?
Oh geez, I'm gonna have to pick Bram Stoker's Dracula because, well, with all of our technical difficulties, at least today, it sucked. So,
Bravo.
so here we are, and that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. And
Very good.
don't piss me off because I can hit you from like 50 yards with a shoe. I've had a lifetime of practice and really rotten kids.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for that. Awesome. So now let's move on to Dario Ciriello, the charming Italian with the British accent. Dario, same question to you.
Bram Stoker or Slaughterhouse 5?
5.
Woo. It's been a long time since I've read Slaughterhouse 5, but it was funny.
That's funny, yeah. A lot of good funny.
Probably wasn't funny if you were in Dresden getting firebombed, but it was funny. And there's time travel.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm going to have to go with Slaughterhouse 5.
Slaughterhouse 5.
Got to.
Okay. Okay. Very
Big
good.
Vonnegut
Thank you
fan.
for that. As am I. And then let's go with John Gilstrap. And I've used this one before, so I'm recycling it. I'm going to call you the man, the myth, the legend, forevermore on this show, because that's how I feel in my heart about you, John. So
Thank you and good night. That's I'm gonna actually I cheated here because I couldn't remember the phrase. Oh shoot, and I lost it. It's Slaughterhouse 5 because I want to become unstuck in time.
very good. Very good. I like that. And let's go with Diane Hammond, the only writer to ever give Free Willy a high five.
That's true. Am I answering the same question?
Yep, same question.
Dracula, Bram Stoker, because of the cape. I like a cape. A little touch of mystery.
You know, he drains you of your blood, right?
Well, never mind that part.
You look a little pale.
Tastes very good, I suspect. I'm sort of stringy, but yeah, I like a little air of mystery. At my age, there isn't a lot of mystery left, so I'll take the cape.
Sure, and who doesn't love a man in a cape? I get it completely. Yeah. I would actually go Dracula too, just because the kind of the hell of going back and forth in Slaughterhouse 5, like through time. It's funny. I mean, oh, there's Dracula. Very good. Very good. Awesome. So let's move on then to our main course here, as it were. So stakes. So what are they? Why are they important? How do you instill them into your story? Maybe then we can also, let's just start with Sue again. You want to get the discussion started?
Sure. Stakes are what makes a novel compelling. In a steakhouse fun. You were going to have meat jokes, right? Stakes are what makes your reader emotionally invested in your characters. If your reader isn't emotional, we've all read that book, the one where you get 30 pages in and you want to push the main character like off a cliff because you just can't get into it and you don't care what kind of goals he has, what he's doing. He's unbelievable and he's not relatable. And if you can make your characters interesting, then people read on. If their stakes are high, they read on. If their stakes are low and interesting, they'll still read on. And so if you have authentic and relatable goals for your characters, you've got to win. If you have low stakes or vague stakes, like a detective chases a killer, but he has no personal investment in getting this killer. But if the killer had killed his wife or his kid or somebody that he knows and is close to, that ups the ante like a lot. So
Sure.
I don't think like in a lot of books it has to be an earth-shattering type stake.
Right.
You can have like a 500-page novel where an asteroid's going to slam into the earth in a couple of years, and somebody's trying to save us, and you could care less about it if you're not invested in him. But then you could have like a children's book where Claudia has to perform in a play by Friday, and her grandma teaches her how to, look at everybody like they're cabbages, and you could be more invested in Claudia and her 8-year-old play than you would be in someone trying to save the earth that's just a big dick and wish you'd fall off the plant.
Right. Well, it's
If you
funny
don't
because
care-
it is,
if you
yeah,
don't
it's
care
like
about the
network
hero,
TV, right?
right?
Well,
If you
yeah,
don't
it's
care
like,
about the
you
hero, you
watch
fail.
Modern Family, and it's the same
Right.
thing every week. The stakes are what they feel in that moment. It's not
Yeah.
always the world ending or life or
Right,
death.
right. It doesn't have to be that huge. So I don't know. I don't think it's about being, like if Claudia is going to be a sheep in her little play, it's not about being the best sheep, but it's about being the sheep that you care the most about. The reader has to fear for her failure. They don't want her to fail, and then your stakes are up. But if you don't care, your reader will stop reading. I'm
Right.
guilty.
Well, sure. It is kind of the why the story matters, right?
Sure.
That's what ends up coming from it. So
Right.
awesome. Thank you for that. Diane, you
very
want to take us from there?
I was thinking about stakes from the writer's standpoint more than the characters, and thinking
Okay.
about the whole notion of sitting down at a computer every day and trying to write something, and thinking about the stakes being very high if you're a perfectionist, which I am, which is not a quality that is enviable, and how setting your own stakes very high can be such an inhibiting exercise. Quite often I've sat down and thought, you're writing for nobody. You're writing for nobody. It's just you. It doesn't matter. Just write it. See what happens later. Lower the stakes. And it makes it so much easier to sit down and do that very dangerous thing of putting words into your computer or on paper where it seems impossible and that you're on the verge of failure every moment. So lower the stakes, and it will be much easier, more organic, and things will come through in the end, and they almost always do. So that's how I was considering your question.
All right, awesome. That's actually I want to swing back to that. Actually, maybe we'll talk the writing stuff, but I think that's a really fascinating discussion on its own, and I think it really relates here too. So let's swing. Let's what did we used to say in my corporate world? We're gonna put that in the parking lot, and we're gonna come back to the parking lot. It's a little bit of scope creep here, but we're gonna come back to it because I have some personal feelings with that actually very recently, so I want to swing back to it. So, John, you want to take us from there?
Sure. The stakes of a story are the reason to read the story. Story is character, and character is story. Hard stop. Plot matters. So to me, I think I write thrillers. Plot matters so much less than character. If no matter what's going on in the world, within the world, the fictional world, if you don't care about the character, it doesn't matter. And so in terms of establishing there's no more important decision, I don't think, that a writer makes than what does the character have vested in the game. Now, that's kind of the answer I had planned when I was sort of talking about this. But it's really interesting that the question came up about relative stakes. It's different events mean different things to different people. I spent almost 16 years in the fire and rescue service, and thousands of calls, right? And it was another day for me. It was the worst moment in the people's lives that I was visiting. And if you're going to tell that story, who's the most interesting point of view, right? It depends on on which story you're trying to tell. Another room and contents fire. You know, they burn up the living room, and you go and you put it out, and then you go home. We've done our job. They're left with the mess.
Sure.
The stakes are different. As a firefighter, if I screw up, it's a different kind of penalty, mental and emotional penalty, than it is for the people whose house is just burned down because I screwed up. If you're writing about a battle sequence, you go to write about war. You know, pick Ender's Game, pick some big, you know, where the stakes are the survival of the world. Make it up, whatever you want it to be.
Right.
To make it compelling, for me, it's really about the character surviving this awful moment that he's in, because in that battle, in that intense moment, he doesn't care about the strategic goals, or she doesn't care about the strategic goals. They care about breathing 15 seconds from now. So the establishing what the stakes are, it's such a critical decision for a writer, in terms, and it all has to be judged relative to what is the story you're trying to tell. Whose story is it? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know what it makes me think of, because there's kind of layers to it, right? There's the external stakes, which is maybe the, you know, life or death or the world ending, right? Or it can be smaller, right? You can have smaller external, but then there's the internal, right? So we're saying like the character, but you have to, if you don't understand what the internal stakes are, right? The external is almost like what happens. The internal is like why it matters. And so, yeah, if you don't like the person, but I think what I loved so much about what you just said actually is it reminded me of what I think Superman stories get wrong for me. Like he's so invulnerable. I've never been a big fan of Superman, but when it works, I think it's because the stakes are actually like the life or death stakes, or the Lois Lane may die, right? She has a life or death stakes, unless you have kryptonite or something, the, you know, contrived notions. But his stakes are all internals. That what would he feel like losing these people and things.
In the movies, Clark Kent's stories are far more interesting, I think, than Superman stories, especially the ones where I forget what that awful TV series was, except they kind of nailed certain parts. Here you've got this guy with superhuman powers he can't tell anybody about. And he just really, he wants to be a kid in high school. See, that's really, everybody can get into that. Everybody can identify with that.
Right. Amen. Thank you for that. Dario, you want to take us from there?
Yeah, this is really interesting. And Diane's parking lot issue is one I'm really looking forward to exploring, you know, to the
We're going to bring the parking lot in, for sure.
But, you know, both Sue and John rightly touched on the importance of personal stakes and character. So yes, there's external stakes, there's internal stakes. Let's define stakes as what the character in question stands to win or lose if they fail. And they can be, yes, they can be the survival of humanity. They can be the character's life or death, but they can be, I think Sue used the example of a kid at school. You know, they can be, am I going to be respected by some, you know, the girl I admire in high school, you know, by the cheerleader or something. They can be emotional stakes, they can be psychological, or they can be physical, or any combination of those. And I think I agree with John that really it's about character and stakes, motivation, all those things are tied in. But I think stakes occur at the scene level as well as the overall plot level, as well as the overall story level. We think of the greater stakes of the novel, but really they're occurring in every scene. I think it was Kurt Vonnegut who said that in any scene, every character has to want something, even if it's a glass of water. And that's kind of true. So not only is something at stake in every scene. There's something to be lost or gained, usually by the viewpoint character in a scene. And maybe I'm getting too much into the weeds here.
No,
But,
no, not at all.
but in a really compelling story, the stakes are going to escalate, often because the character screws up in an earlier scene or the antagonist wins. I love it when a character's choice ups the ante and, he makes the wrong choice or she makes the wrong choice. And the
Right.
stakes.
I think stakes a lot of times are really related to consequences. Right. Like, so
Yes,
when you up
yes.
them, right, if there's consequences to what happens, and the stake itself is kind of a consequence, right? It could just be humiliation, right? Like there's lots of comedies that like you follow along just because you're like, oh man, he's going to be really humiliated or she's going to like look like a fool. And they're trying to just prevent looking like a fool. And it's very low stakes, but it can be very entertaining. But I love your point to the scenes, because I think I think people are very used to the idea of characters having motivations, right? Like I was a thespian in my time, right? And so I was like, what is my motivation? And so I think like goals, motivations, people are a little like easier attuned to, but what's the opposite? Like what's the consequence of not achieving that, to the person, and making that evident for your audience, the reader, watcher, whatever storytelling medium you're using, but taking that to the stakes, to the scene level, to the chapter level, then I think that can actually point out when maybe that chapter, that scene's not needed. Let me tell you, like I was reading a book, and my general rule is I will never talk poorly about living writers on here. That's why sometimes I like to bring up like the dead, because then they tell no tales. I can say whatever I want. But I was reading a very well-known writer that I had never read before, and I was like, oh, I should try to read X, And there was so many scenes where I got the same information that I already knew, as the reader. Maybe the characters were getting it for the first time, but I already knew it. It didn't change the stakes. It didn't do anything. And besides the redundance of information, I think to me, the greater sin as a reader, what I was getting bored with, was that it didn't change the stakes at all. Like everything was still like the story didn't change, nothing happened. There's no rising of tension or anything with it. So that's interesting. So thank you. I mean, just really for pointing out the scene aspect of it. So kind of continue on a bit, right? So there's the personal stakes, right? The character stakes. Then there's also kind of like a community stakes, right? Like so to go very broad, right? It can be Superman saving the entire world, so now everyone's involved, right? But that can be that's a very particular type of storytelling when you're talking the world being at stake, or the universe, the multiverse. Right, like it has as we have scope creep in our storytelling as it goes nuts. But there is the getting the idea of when you start, especially when you have multiple story kind of character point of views, things like that. How do you go about kind of shedding light on those, perhaps the community stakes, not just the individual character, but when it's how that story is affecting multiple characters? And anyone, feel free to jump in.
When I wrote I wrote a trilogy that stars Victoria Emerson. It's post-apocalyptic. It's there are no vampires, but it's about rebuilding society after a nuclear event, and it kind of gets to what I call it is the concentric circles of responsibility, which goes to stakes. And it, quite honestly, it sort of reflects my worldview that I'm a community-oriented person, but all y'all are expendable if it comes down to protecting my immediate family, right?
Sure.
So it's there's like 3 people, and everybody else will die at my hand to protect those. Now you grow out, and then there's the friends and the relatives, and right. And in a perfect world, it's the entire community. That's what Law and Order is all about. We try to protect that. And I think that any story or any situation that puts a character in a position to have to defend those stakes, the intruder in the home, right? The snakes on a plane. No, not actually that. And it goes back to what I was saying before, the relativism of what's important and what the stakes really are. Now, my world is a thriller world, so it's, I don't, but it goes into relationships too. What are you willing to sacrifice to preserve the relationship? Is a career worth a relationship, or is a relationship worth a career? There's been a lot of ink spilled over that, paging John Updike. So it all comes into the decision making. It's all very important.
I think that's true. I come from a literary standpoint because I do literary fiction, and no matter how quiet the book or the plot or the stakes, it's the same thing. It just tends to be more interior, but your characters, if they're well drawn, are no less imperiled by their own doing or by an external force. The stakes are going to be extremely high no matter what if the character is well drawn. And they may assign themselves the stakes. It may be completely interior, internally it's fine, but it's just as important to drive a story, even if it's a very quiet story. There's got to be, I wonder about stakes and tension. Is it the same thing? Both move things, a story forward.
I think I define tension as the outcome of the stakes being felt, really.
Sure. I agree with you, Dario. It's kind of like stakes drive the tension.
Yeah.
Right. If you don't know what the stakes are, you don't have any tension. So the stakes are kind of driving that feeling of tension that someone's getting. Did you have some? I think you were going to say something else, Dario, if you want to.
My mind's all over the place. This is such a great question. I was just thinking that, especially in the course of a novel, as subplots start to proliferate, the characters and the subplots will have their own personal stakes as well, which may be really different from the stakes in, at the novel level or the larger story arc. I mean, just, a character having a secret they don't want anyone to know, having, I mean, that's a stake right there. Anything that has meaning to the character and which will either greatly improve or greatly mess with their life if they fail. I mean, that's stakes right there. They're at every level. And, and one of the reasons that it's so compelling for the reader when the author has the stakes right, and of course, peripheral to that, motivations, goals, all that, is because we all have stakes in our daily lives. We all have things we all have things that we're afraid of losing.
Right. Amen. Well, and that goes back to what Diane had mentioned, even about the writers, which we are going to circle back to. But what that made me think of, right, is like, and I'm going to really date myself here. Although I grew up on the reruns of this, so I'm dating myself to the reruns.
Easy.
Three's Company. So, and you would have Jack Tripper. And I used to joke with this. I was the single dad. I had my two girls, Rhiannon and Cassie, and we went to father-daughter dance. And I was joking with them. I'm like, how's this going to work? Am I like Jack Tripper? I have to like pretend you don't know about each other, like play with you and then go over here and play with you. They're like 7, 8 years old kind of at the time. But even in that like scenario, right, you can have, taken out of the Three's Company, just using it as a general scenario. Is okay, so you have this guy or this girl that's on a date with two people and she's trying to juggle them, right? And so as an audience, you're like, and I think that's why I wanted to bring this example up, because the audience, I think, also it plays a major, they made the biggest important part in this. But there's the character stakes for Jack Tripper, which is the humiliation, getting dumped by both girls, right? And you're kind of like tiptoeing it. And then there's what's happening with the girl characters, right? Maybe sometimes they're just the character of the week and they're gonna be gone, but sometimes that's one of the other girls in the apartment or whatever the scenario is, right? And then there's the bigger stake, right? Like the bigger arc that's going on that can be unfolding with it, which is like, what kind of like man is he going to be? Are you going to, right? Like taking it out of the Three's Company world is he going to learn his lesson and become a better person? What about the girls maybe he's affecting? Maybe they're going to come back down the line as a subplot down the line that he now has to deal with. John, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, because
there.
that same plot line was Back to the Future, with the addition of not being tongue kissed by your mom. Right? And it's the same thing, but the stakes are just creepier. Right?
I love that.
Oh, right.
So there are all kinds of ways to
I've
twist
been
the same
waiting
thing.
for someone on open bar to say tongue kissed by your mom, and you were the one. You get the prize. Thank you so much for that.
Topping that's going to be almost impossible.
And we talk
Right.
about stakes not necessarily being the end of the world. Think about it. I'm going to movies now, but think of the stakes in Dead Poets Society, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Sure.
Really, it's hard to define what the stakes are, other than young men growing up to be better men despite the pressures against them. Good Will Hunting. To Kill a Mockingbird is another one. The stakes are high for Robinson. The one that I can't remember the character's name, who's accused
I
of
know who you're
rape.
talking about.
Yeah.
But for Scout, our primary, our point of view character, the stakes are high but undefinable. But because the character is so well defined.
Right. Well, I think that's, did you guys see the movie Sideways?
Wine?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the wine one. Yeah.
I will not drink Merlot.
Yeah. Well, not drink enough and more low. Yeah, and so that one, like, that's another one where you're like, his buddy, he could lose his, his engagement, right? But for the main character, it's a lot more nebulous to describe. But you can feel those emotional stakes. Like it's more about like, who do they become? What's how do you go forward from that? So I think that's a great point, John. Thank you for that. I also think so. I wanted to swing back to the reader side of this, because I think the other fun thing that I enjoy, and I think I joke that I'm a thespian. I don't know the last time I did any acting. It's my adult kids. My girls were young, and I stopped acting because I was a single dad with two little girls that needed me to be home and not, gallivanting around doing community theater or whatever, like whatever small stakes things I was doing at the time. But there's the audience aspect of it, right? And I think one of the really fun things in stories that I tend to love is that when maybe the characters don't even know all of the stakes, right? Like, I don't know all of the stakes. We're doing this Zoom call that we botched. Well, not we, collectively, I botched horribly to start, right? I don't know exactly what the stakes are to that, right? Like, so like, maybe that was the one big break was going to be there and then I botched it, but who knows? But when you have a fictional world, right? The reader does get to know what the stakes are, right? And so,
Right.
So like example of this, like the novel I'm writing right now. So I finished Pirates of Appalachia, which I've talked about on the show ad nauseum. So that's finished. I've started the next novel, which is based on a short story of mine called Teeth that was in it's kind of behind me. Yeah, Dario knows because he helped me edit the little book, the tiny little book back there.
Without Expiration, great story.
Without Expiration, yeah, the anthology of short stories. And so there's a scene where there's a guy that's become a vigilante after he's lost his daughter. That story is at 1,100 words. It's very visceral, it's very dark. And then the novel's kind of taken off from there. That's the first chapter with some changes, and it's taken off from there. And there's a scene where he goes to the dentist, and in the chapter before, from another character, we learned that dentist might have been responsible. for him losing his daughter, right? He might be the killer. For the reader, it seems like he very much is the killer. And so now there's the irony of it. The dramatic irony is the characters don't know, right? Neither of them know that that he, that's there, but the reader knows, right? So there's that kind of in-story stakes of what the characters know, and then there's the out-story stakes that the reader or the audience, whatever medium you're using, knows.
Right.
So any thoughts from you guys about how to kind of employ that? I mean, it's dramatic irony essentially, but how to kind of and more broadly is how to really start to convey. How do we've talked about what stakes are. How do we instill those? How do we convey those? I mean, I'm 25% Italian, so it's really coming out. I have a lot of hand motions right now.
I think that if you have the reader knows the stakes before all the characters do, I think play a lot of catch up. If I find that when I'm reading myself, that if I can look ahead and know exactly what's going to happen, then I'm not as invested in the characters finding out for themselves. I thought the concentric circles thing was very interesting because I suppose you could go from the outside in or from the inside out when you're building. I think that The Stand does, like Stephen King's The Stand does like an amazing job with that. Coming from a huge point of view to all of the characters interacting on just a personal level like that. But I think you can shoot yourself in the foot if you go too far out on a limb with the reader knowing what's happening before the characters do.
Don't you think too that a lot of that you can control through point of view? So
Sure.
if we see dual
Yeah.
points of view, neither one can see the other, but we can
Right.
see them both.
That's
And
true.
by parsing out or doling out
Right.
information very carefully.
Yeah, it has to be done so carefully.
Yeah,
Right.
economically.
Mhm.
Then the reader has enough to get the connection. The characters haven't made the connection yet,
Yeah.
but I think that's one way of keeping that
I think
sense
that
of
works on a short
uncertainty.
term.
Mhm.
I think that if it is like carried out through half the book, I think it would get a little bit
Tedious.
old,
Mhm.
but on the short term, I see exactly what you're saying. I think that causes a lot of tension and a lot of friction and a lot of anticipation, unless it's drawn out to the point where you start losing interest in what's going to be happening next.
Or it's so
Sure.
aggravating that you want to take them all and shake them.
Yes, you want to
know-
shake
Right.
people.
You knew a long time ago,
And
but
usually it ends up being the book you're shaking while you throw it across the room.
Well, I think it tends to happen when it gets drawn out too long,
yeah,
right? It's
Yeah.
like when they should
Right.
obviously start to
Exactly.
learn what it is, and you kind of leave it, right? It's like
Right.
Jack Tripper. It's like they should know now, and I was like, no, it's still
Yeah.
happening, right? It's like no. Let's move it on.
Yeah.
We have 30 minutes for this, so I think I mean stage plays, you see it all the time. That's I mean dramatic irony is a tool, right, to use, but and I think it's one way you can kind of reveal stakes and like build that that tension in your reader. But I think it's well said is like anything can get old, right? But I think sometimes it's mystery box storytelling. It's like at some point it's better you can have that mystery box, but sometimes it's actually more fun if you open it early and just see what the consequences are, and that will lead to more stakes and will lead to the raising it.
Is,
So,
is
John,
that
it seemed like you were about to say something.
Sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Is that a
John,
term,
Dario, you guys go.
mystery box storytelling? I'm not familiar
It
with.
is.
What is it?
That's J.J. Abrams. I don't consider him a writer, so I'm going to bag on him for this. So he did Lost, the TV show Lost, that people loved at first, and then it petered out because there was nothing behind it. So what he tends to do And he says it. He goes, a mystery box. And then we have a mystery box. There's a quote. I'm just literally like this little video I saw of him doing it. There's a mystery box. There's a mystery box. And he's a Hollywood type. So, and I'm in the shadow of Hollywood, but I feel comfortable kind of making fun of them because they have enough money. They can deal with it. But that's what it is. It's like, oh, look, these guys crashed on an island in a plane. Well, how did they survive? Oh, that's first mystery box. Oh, and now there's this possible dinosaur creature, mystery box. Oh, and now this person's having visions, mystery box. And all of that could be really cool if you have you actually know what they lead to.
Right.
He doesn't, so it's just mystery boxes. Nothing comes of it. Yeah, and so you feel unfulfilled. It could be a cool way. You could tell a story that way. I mean, a lot of mysteries are kind of a mystery box. But the masters of it, they lead to something. They keep kind of they keep building to something. It's not just I don't have an idea here, throw a new thing here to, here's a shiny thing. I always joke with my wife that I do that. So the lovely Claire, I always go shock and awe, and I just try to like be shocking and like move on to the next thing. She never falls for it because I'm the J.J. Abrams of husbands, but that's what it is in a nutshell. John, I'm sorry, you waited patiently. You probably have something wise to say.
No, it's interesting to hear this because I don't know that I have a process for what I do, and I don't know that I actually have rules for what I do, but it's important to me to never break the fourth wall. So I think it's not something that an author should judge for oneself. I think I'm invisible in the books. I don't think there's ever, certainly not in the last 10 or 15 books, there's never been a time that I, the author, have spoken to the reader. Mm-hmm. Everything that happens is filtered through a character. So there's no omniscient knowledge in my books at all. That doesn't mean that character, in fact, it's always the case, that the bad guy knows things the good guy doesn't know, and vice versa. Thrillers, that's how you establish that collision course that works. But there's never that moment. I don't have the stage manager from our town who narrates what the next thing is going to be. I think other people can do it really well, and I don't object to other people doing it. It's just not me.
Well, I don't think it's so much about having the narrator, but what you're doing is dramatic irony. Right. So that would actually meet that definition of having the antagonist doing something and protagonist do it. Dramatic irony is that your audience, your reader, knows what both those characters do, but those characters don't know. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's different levels to the whole dramatic irony thing. But that's kind of what I was getting at, is that like, hey, this character knows something. These characters don't. The reader does because they're reading it. And or it's a play, right? That happens. That term came from plays, and I could, if I was a better Shakespeare scholar, I could quote some Shakespeare when it happens. But yeah, that's kind of the thing, is how you and that's plays you would think very clearly. Oh, but everyone's seen it, and I think as writers of books, we do the same thing, right? Like we're doing it. We want to give you this information for a reason. You're writing that chapter for that reader for a reason. You're writing the next one, for that reason.
I am also a mystery box. I didn't know this until like 2 minutes ago. I am also a mystery box writer, because in the book I'm writing now, there's a killer he's got a list of people he's going to kill, and I know who the list of people are, and I know that he has been hired by somebody to do this for a reason. I got well into the story and I realized, okay, I got to stop faking this. I need to know what the reason is, which is it's a showstopper until you figure out what it is that they're doing. And and I figured it out. It'll all work out. And it's a MacGuffin. I mean, the actual MacGuffin isn't that huge, because it doesn't have to be. It's perceived as huge by the person who hired the killer. So, but I guess that's mystery box writing, and it works because you're on a deadline. You got to get stuff done. You get the scenes written, but then there comes to the point where you got to get to the motivation, and it's like, well, shit, now I gotta figure this out.
So is mystery box, is that just another way of saying revelation? developing a character is really just a series of revelations, mystery boxes, things about them that
Sure.
you didn't expect or didn't know. And so you peel the onion and there are this series of revelations that begin to make more and more sense as your story unfolds. Again, from a literary standpoint, rather than a plot standpoint, it's got to work that way or you've got nothing. But that's how I see it anyway. It's just this series of
Sure.
revelations that in the end all knit together to make sense of a character
Right.
as a fully formed
I
individual.
think peeling the onion is really a good way to put it. And like with the TV show Lost, you know, they peeled the skin back and they peeled it back, and gosh, it was going places. And then all of a sudden you ended up with this empty vegetable. You know, so you don't
like
want
an
to
egg
end up
yolk
with
in
an
there. You're
empty
like, where did we
vegetable.
get an egg yolk from?
Yeah.
Have you ever let a head of garlic sit too long and it
Oh,
just
all the
becomes
time.
Never.
air? You know, so over time you peel it back and there's
There's
just air
nothing.
in the middle. That was lost, you know?
Right.
That was Lost. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like, and I think John, like I think you really pointed out something really important, right? Is that there's a point where the storyteller has to know where that is. So I think with books, I think you might get less of it. I don't know. I've read some books where you feel like it just deflated when you get to the end. But I think for the most part, because someone writes a book and then you edit it and things and it's one actual installment and you get it and then you get the next if it's a series, right? With TV, I think it happens quite a bit, like in TV and movies where it's just like, it's something fun. Look, you know? And I think Mystery Box, I think in that respect gets a little, it's a little more tongue-in-cheek kind of pointing at them. I thought, Diane, I love your term, like revelatory, right? Like revelation, revealing. That would be a really amazing way, right? Like that's a really fulfilling story. You keep having, and they build, and it gets you to some place at the end.
Yeah.
At some point, as a writer, you have to know what that end is, right? Doesn't have. I like to write not knowing what it is until I kind of get there. But that's for me. No one else has seen that yet, right? No one knows what's going to happen. And if it doesn't get there, you get to time travel, you get to edit, you get to figure that out. You don't suddenly leave it to where it's like, oh, that dinosaur didn't mean anything. Oh, you know,
Well,
I
I
made
think
my millions.
Lost is a good example of popularity trumping a sensible story. I mean, the series outlived its storyline, and so they were hostage to being popular, and they couldn't pay that ransom. So that was a different issue. But
has anybody in the history of ever said, "Boy, I'm really satisfied with the ending of It," Stephen King's It? Great story, and then it's like, are you kidding me? You know,
well, when they tried to do the movie adaptation with the actual ending, people hated it
even more.
John,
I've reminded.
Oh yeah.
I've never read it, but the one I know very well and have read several times is The Stand, and so many people hate the ending of that because it's kind of, not to give too much away, but it's kind of inconclusive. And to me, that's realism in that particular one. I don't know about it. In The Stand, for me, that was total verisimilitude. And I like ambiguity and I like loose ends. Coming back to stakes, the writer really needs to know what they are in every case, and maybe we don't want loose ends there. But I only brought that up because you mentioned endings, and there are some damn good writers who just can't end a book to save their lives. Endings are hard. Endings are difficult.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I heard Hemingway, I think it was I'm going to butcher the name. I'll try to on the edit. I'll try to include it on a link, or if someone on the chat knows, feel free to pop it. But I think it was The Sun Also Rises. He wrote 42 endings or something, something different until you get to the one. And, and he was always, he would also write 1,000 different titles until he got to the one. So it was a distillation process, and he was a big drinker. So it makes sense why he was distilling things so often. But, but I think like there is that. It can be hard. I think some loose ends might be okay on the end. But I think if you don't, I think you have to be very cognizant of what those like you're purposeful on what the loose ends might be. Like you want to, you're imparting something for the reader to like pick up, right? For your audience to pick up. If it's just, hey, it's a giant spider showed up and there's no reason that giant spider's there, then you're just like, well, what the hell just happened?
Does that so does that relate back to stakes? In other words, is part of the ending? No, but I mean, I think
to pay them off, though. No, I think you're right. I think you're right.
Part of the ending issue that if you leave the reader without really understanding if the stakes have been won or lost, if the goal has been, achieved or they've failed at it, maybe that's what screws up an ending, if it's not really clear to the reader whether it's a win or lose.
Right. I know. I wouldn't shrug. Actually, I was just thinking that was a brilliant thought. I mean, and I say I have an ironic tone, so it always sounds like I could mean exactly what I'm saying or not. But in this case, I mean it. Like I was just saying that, and I was like, I think that is one of the, maybe not the only, but I think that is one of the major things is you don't feel like if the stakes were paid off or not. Like
I think this takes us back to the parking lot issue.
Okay, very good.
I think there are some authors, and I like Stephen King. I like most of Stephen King's books. I've grown out of the being creeped out really badly stage, but when I was in that stage, there was nobody better. And in the case of it, Pennywise the clown, first of all, I'm terrified of clowns anyway. And I think there comes a point where you look at your manuscript and you realize it's 18 inches tall and you have to end it somehow. And hey, everybody's afraid of spiders, so let's do a spider.
He was also, I think, drinking and doing a lot of meth at the time. So,
and that's fine.
God love them.
And I think there are some writers who are at a status that they get a mulligan. That people will go, okay, fine. The ending sucked, but it was a good ride. I'll still read his next book, which then now goes back to Diana's point of the pressures that writers put on themselves that are not in that position to, the stakes of, well, shit, I got to make this. This is really got to be good. And I forget the difference between which and that, and what does a comma really do? It's that, and it's a source of stress, right? Yeah. And the stakes in that moment are high.
Right.
Well, I mean, who hasn't written an ending that you want to have the just zing, and instead it just is a thud, and you didn't nail it yet, and you got to go back and try, take another run at it, and then another dud, and then you eventually, hopefully, you do find the sweet
spot. Question is how could Stephen King not see that was such a dud? It was such an amazing book until the very end. How could he not realize that ending was just horrendous? And that I have never talked to one person that thought that ending was adequate. It was like he was, I'm done with this, and just slammed it shut and let the spider eat everybody, and it was finished.
I think there really may be a case that was the drugs and alcohol.
Yeah,
and he might admit that was a case of drugs and alcohol at the time, but I do think though sometimes and that's probably, I'm pushing my camera around here, but a question for another day. But I think sometimes you're so close to your work, right? That I know people try to get beta readers, things like that, but there is a bit of you're so close to it, and you think this thing really worked, and it didn't. Right, it kind of falls on deaf ears. But I think when you're under, I think by that point he was probably under deadlines. I think there's also it's very well known, right? He was doing a lot of drugs and alcohol early in his career. So there maybe there's a confluence of things there, but but yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Yeah, it's like, yeah, giant spider. Like, it's actually very I'm gonna butcher saying this because I'm a West Virginia boy transplanted to the West Coast, so I have no indefinite tone here. But the Deus Ex Machina. I took Latin and I actually learned it pretty well. I'm butchering it, but the gods in the
Deus.
machine.
Yeah.
Deus, thank you, John. Deus Ex Machina, where it's like, oh, here now the god in the machine is the spider that comes down and
Right.
there's a spider you have to deal with.
I don't know. Going back to stakes, I think comedy writers have different stakes.
Oh,
You know,
for sure.
Ah.
the stakes usually are either you're going to be totally humiliated, or
Very common.
somebody's going to die, and that's it, and ending a book on a without tying everything up seems kind of I don't know, like a cheap shot, but I can't talk because my last book ended with Bigfoot finding Elvis's gun,
Well, and confirming what you call a group of Bigfoots. So I mean, that was as a guy that's now had 3 Bigfoot guests on the show, I was very happy. The next one, I'm actually going to ask him, do you call it a shoe, a group of Bigfoots?
It off topic, but it was such a great story because my son had just passed away and we were all in the car and everybody was so sad. And my other son said something about, what do you call a bunch of Bigfoot? And he said a shoe. And I think it was like the first time we really, really laughed, after that point. So
Sure.
a shoe, a Bigfoot kind of has a place in my heart.
Amen. And I always, with every one of these episodes, I link up everyone that's been on the show. So if you want to see that episode with Sue, you go on and you'll have the link once I set them up. But it's all out there. Diane's is coming up. Everyone else, John and Dario's is already out. So.
Well, I got one last thing to say about ending, so that's not what we were trying to talk about. But has anybody read a book, as I did just the other day, where you think, surely this is the end? No. Surely this is the end? No. There's another chapter and then another chapter, and they should have just stopped. But there was this desperation to get it right. At least that's the way you end up reading it. And like, you needed a really good editor and they let you down because this was, the thud kept thudding and it's so frustrating. So that's the opposite of the abrupt ending that doesn't work either, but there's the never ending ending, which is just torture too.
Yeah. I just read a novella. It's a series of novella that I was reading from that author I mentioned earlier. And it's like 3 novellas, and it was just a novella, and I'm like, is this over? What's happening? I'm like, okay, more's going to happen. Nothing more happened. I'm like, what just happened? 50 pages of nothing,
Right.
Have you all had that writer's
considerations?
moment where you're at the end, and well, okay, this happened to me twice. This happened to me twice in the various books where I've got it planned out. There's the ending, and then there's sort of the coda at the end of it, where you kind of the 2 or 3 pages that tie everything together.
Sure.
And I'm typing along, and I go, no, that's the ending. That's the ending right here. This is the ending. I can't do better than right here.
Right.
Not only is it self-serving because I don't have to write more pages, but it's also that exciting moment of surprise.
Yeah. Well, I've heard of authors doing that where they purposely write but they'll just cut, right? They literally just in the edit kind of come back and go where it is. So I think that's actually, not that you need me to say it, John, but I'm going to say it. You're a brilliant writer, and I think that is one of the signs of it, is that is knowing where that is. And I think way too much in society generally is given to thinking you have the answer right the first time.
Yeah.
Right. I think the first time, our first thought, whatever, my first thought half the time is just craziness. It's like you get a shot and go running down the street naked. That's never the right thought. as
Never.
I've learned.
Never.
as the Glendora PD has told me, not the right thought. You need to handle that one. But I think it's the discernment, right? Of when you look at it and you go as a whole, it's like, oh, actually, you know what? I wrote this and I invested in this, but this is the investment I need to shuck off. That this is the story. This is what I want to give people. And I think that's a brilliant way to get to the actual ending. And maybe that means that there's I think the stakes paying off. I think it's a very interesting question to Dario's point, but I think that is kind of your wrap up, right? I don't think you always need like a long wrap up anyways. Most people aren't, expecting it nowadays as it is, but I think that is a very astute point is, okay, what's enough? Do I need to go on for 20 pages? Do I need to go on, 3 pages to, I do think you need some wrap up. I think sometimes stories end very abruptly, and unless that's really the point that you really just left your reader off like a baby at the fire department.
If the story,
you need a little more than that as a reader, but how much more is discernment? I mean, that's on the writer.
If the story was very, very good, people are going to want to stay in your world, whether it's wrapped up or not. They just want to stay in there, and I'm more of the Hitchcock school of, leave them wanting more. I think I slightly prefer that, but sometimes I'll read a book where, back to Mr. King, whom I feel very much like John about. Sometimes, you think the book is essentially over and you've got another 150 pages.
Right.
I'm okay with that if I'm enjoying the ride and the world.
Sure.
And the characters. So, but usually, if the writer's a good one, things are still being revealed. That maybe subplots with characters with their own stakes and stories that, need to be wrapped up. It may be background stuff. I think endings is a whole other program, Bill, if you haven't done one yet.
But then there's also the device of the epilogue. And
I like epilogues. Good one.
Yeah.
It's so handy, and yet mostly what's in epilogues can be thrown out. But it's so tempting. Oh, what didn't I tie up? Well, wait, I'll do it. What were they wondering about?
I
think to Dario's point that when they do it, when you really love it, you're really happy that epilogue's there. Right. You get to have that little moment or them there. But
epilogue,
but then the other
John doesn't read fantasy.
An epilogue has to earn its place on the page.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be there,
sure,
it has to have new information, a twist, and like the organ chord, bum bum bum. Some. It has to be there, other than just and then.
Right.
Sure.
And all too often it's like prologues. Those, I think they need to serve a purpose.
Sure.
Agreed.
Well, yeah, it's kind of Chekhov's gun, right? Like everything needs to serve some purpose.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people get a little, I think nowadays we've gotten a little too literal with the Chekhov's gun thing. Like older fiction, sometimes I have a harder time because I think it gives you too much details. I think if you go back, it's like way too much, and I don't know what's the important details. I think sometimes with Chekhov's gun, we get a little too succinct to where you only get the important details, so they become so obvious that the story becomes obvious. But I think for if you're going to include a prologue or an epilogue, sure. Yeah, it better have a gun that's going to go off. There's some reason that it exists. Dario, were you about to say something? I thought I saw.
No, I was just fascinated listening to you.
Thank you. You're the first person that's ever said that to me. And God bless you. You're on the show whenever you want, Dario. Awesome. So before we get to the parking lot of just talking about the writer stakes on here, just the and as an aside, Diane, part of what I loved about that is that I was thinking about the show. I always take December off from recording. And then I start, getting things on the schedule. And I didn't actually start recording again until this month. So I had like 2 months off. So it gave me a really long time to think about the show and like why I do it, and part of it was that actually what I like about the show, especially when I just have like with you guys on that have each been on one-on-one, I like to learn like why you write more than how you write. Right. So this open bar is a little bit more about the how you write, right? We talk kind of the storytelling craft, of it. And I just love you guys. So that part, I don't love the how you write. I don't actually like, if it was just to me, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. But I love you guys. I want to like build a community of all of us so that everyone get to know each other. And it's fun to kind of talk the storytelling part of it, but the why, right, I think is a more fascinating question for each person. But before we get there, as a tease to everyone that's there, I wanted to switch over to is there anything else, like any other considerations stakes wise, you guys want to kind of throw into the mix as a writer?
I'm wondering how live we are, and if it's possible for those of a certain age that could take an exploratory trip around their house for, say, 2 minutes.
Other men of a certain age agree with you, John.
So we are live. If you guys, so why don't, if you guys need to explore the house, go explore the house.
Oh, look over there. I'll be back.
And some of us need another drink too.
Absolutely. I just keep mine on the table. You guys explore the house.
Too.
Diane, Sue, are you with me, or do you need to explore?
No, I am with you.
Nope, I don't need to explore.
So perfect, because for the folks watching, there's a few of them with us right now. So they won't mind everyone leaving. Is there any other considerations you would throw into the mix as we're talking stakes, like anything we missed as we've been going through?
I just marvel that anybody thinks about their own writing this intellectually. I have no idea whether my characters, I assume they have stakes. I mean, they certainly have issues and problems, but I have to confess, I've never once thought that cerebrally about my characters and how to develop their story. I just sort of go, bleh, and hopefully the character is interesting enough as it develops that things like stakes
that's because it's absolutely natural for you, Diane. I mean,
don't know. I think it's because I
have to think about it.
I don't think, but I don't think that's a virtue. I think it's more of a.
I don't know. I do. I think it makes it more authentic, really. The way you write is just it's just a natural progression,
It's a miracle, is what it is. I mean,
I've never thought about it either.
See, now you're going to be thinking about. I'm going to be thinking about.
I don't want to be thinking about it.
No. So actually, I need to say this real quick as we say this, because part of the reason I delayed on this aspect of the show so much. So I had 3 classes to get my bachelor's in English, and I had published a bunch of stories before that, right? Just short stories, like little, publications back in the day when you mailed them like physically to everyone, and got your rejections back and self-addressed stamped them.
Rated SASE, yes.
Yeah.
I remember well.
And what I hated about it, well, for one, I was working, I made a career that didn't require that. But what I hated about the going to school was the talking about it. And I was doing really well, and suddenly I wasn't doing well. And that was because the school, I was thinking about all those things all the time.
Yep.
And so I really think that it's fine to intellectualize all of it, right? But you kill the dissect. I had an old teacher that said that, right? You don't dissect a frog without the frog dying. And half the time we kill the frog. Do that, right?
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, is that you don't kill the frog until you've had a chance to actually see the frog in nature. Right? Like you have the story, you have everything. You don't kill anything before it's had a chance to live. and you had a chance to observe it and things,
Mhm.
right? So I think all of the stuff we talk about on the show, and I know I've had guests on that disagree with me on this, but is you only think about this stuff after you've written, right? And then you're going back and going, why is this falling flat? Then the intellectualizing
Mhm.
might actually make sense, right? It's
Mhm.
okay, why is this scene doesn't seem to make sense? Every time I read it's falling flat.
Well, I
Oh,
think
you
you
know
go
what?
back
The
to the
stakes
dead
aren't there.
frog. You know, a dead frog only has one way to go, and if you're intellectualized that much,
Right?
that's the only place that it can go.
Yeah.
But if you have a live frog, you're just kind of following it along
Right.
and seeing
Right.
where it takes you, and that's usually a lot more interesting than smelling formaldehyde. You know,
But that gets into process too, is how much
Right.
do you want to think before you overthink and kill the whole
Sure.
thing?
right?
Right. Like
Especially for
if you
pants.
are putting a outline, like how much do you want to outline?
Exactly.
Right.
Or and if you're
And that kind of depends by the person, but I
Yeah.
do think there's a level of like, when are you killing the thing?
Right. You
Yeah.
could kill the whole
Um,
fizzle by overdoing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So.
you know, that's the difference between pantsers and plotters too. I think if you
Mhm.
take a pantser and you make them plot, they end up with a dead book. Well,
Right.
from personal
Mhm.
experience anyway. Whereas if you just follow it and say, what the
Sure.
fuck, I'm just gonna go along, you know, you might actually end up with something interesting
Right.
and not have a dead book.
Amen.
So
Right, yeah, amen. No, I know I've always like, and I don't know that, I mean, that teacher, I have to find his name at some point, but he loved Moby Dick. He loved all the stuff that I actually don't in fact love. But I always took that to heart, and I realized at some point, and that's why I stepped away from college. The biggest reason I stepped away was that, man, I couldn't write anymore. Like, and so now when I write, I don't think about any of this stuff
yep.
at all. I write and kind of, and I think there's that nebulous saying of write what works. But if I was to give that a definition, I would say write what invests the reader. So, and I'm a very like discerning reader just naturally. Like when I read, part of the reason I don't like to edit for or do group group writing of things is I don't like to actually try to like, I don't want to kill your frog, when you're like, if that's your pet, like I don't want to kill your pets, and so I don't like to do it. I don't like to kill my pets. So I like to let them grow and get where we're getting. And then after the fact, then you can kind of get into the weeds once it's grown, once it's died of old age. Dissect the baby, fine, go to town. So John, Dario, welcome back. We've been talking about,
I don't know.
Dead frogs is what I heard. So
if your frogs died of old age, it's time to stop writing. You know, you've overdone your story by probably a couple of 100 pages.
Amen.
I'm not sure I'm going to comment. My comment might have nothing to do with what you were actually talking about because I came in late. But I heard you talking about essentially breaking the back of a story. And I think that's a problem for you young writers, new writers, journey, just starting out there. If you liked it today and you hate it tomorrow, give it another week, because today might very well be right. So you can work and rework and flog a manuscript to the point that it takes all the personality out. And you have a character saying that is something up with which I will not put. And while grammatically correct, it's not
I
good.
love that.
John Gardner said something very similar, that you can keep on editing and adjusting a book, in an attempt to please everyone, I think he suggested. But he said great writing has a gusto to it, and that's true. And it's not about it. Yeah, I think you're so right. You can really overdo it. I've been in several writing groups and founded a few, but I could never understand people having work critiqued or commented on when it's in process. When a book's done, I like some input, and I like to run it by some beta readers, but but yeah, you can just dilute something till there's nothing left. Yeah.
This is a true story. I had 7 years ago. There was a copy editor who, and if you don't, copy editors are wonderful people, or they are absolutely hideous. This happened to be, her name is Rosemary, and she will never copy edit me again. But there was a sentence. This is the Jonathan Graves series, and the sentence was essentially, Jonathan looked at the door the kid came through, and she changed it. Jonathan looked at the door whence the child had come.
No.
In a thriller, in a contemporary thriller. It's like, oh my God, whence?
Who in the world uses whence?
Holy
Oh,
shit,
that was
whence?
awesome. I love that. I mean, God bless her for knowing to use
my
whence
God.
in that scenario.
You know,
Are you sure that wasn't AI? Was that like advanced
No,
AI
she was a real
that
human
shit?
being, Rosemary.
John, I hesitate these days because I'm a copy editor and a line editor as well, and occasionally developmental, but I hesitate to even correct who and whom these days, partly because of usage, partly because sometimes it just feels, kind of nitpicky to a lot of people, and also, and certainly in dialogue, very few people are going to use whom in dialogue.
Well, I
And
think, yeah.
copy editors are a weird breed.
Yeah.
Are you part of the
Sorry,
cabal that constantly changes what commas do? They work this way sometimes, but not that time. You use it with but, B-U-T, not with the but not the next time. I have no idea what a comma is for. That's what I've heard.
Commas in English are hard. There's a lot of art to it, but there are some rules.
I nearly broke a copy editor with my first book. I kept getting things that were, the timeline was wrong. Something was wrong. I don't remember now, but we went through 3 iterations. And by the last one, I had these magic marker red marks saying, no, no, no. I think
and I have to say real quick here, because we had, I think, my favorite comment on the entire history of Writers Drinking Whiskey here. So euphoric_loop. I have killed so many frogs by trying to plot. And amen. Amen. Like, and Dario, John, you guys had wandered away as you were looking around the house.
We're not talking about French people, right?
No. We're talking frogs. The comment comes from the fact that I had said I had an old professor that used to say, we kill to dissect. Right. And so what I don't like, and so the euphemism to writing was, I don't like to kill my writing. I like to watch the frog. Right. But when you're editing, the frog's dead. The frog's lived its lifespan, right? You didn't kill it. It died of natural age, and now you're dissecting. So everything we talk about on the show, to me, in my head, and how I experience it in real time, every morning when I write from 8:30 to 1 in the afternoon, is I think of none of this. But when I start to go through and edit, I really just edit everything by feel, but and see if it works for me. But there's that, if something's really not working, that's the time to intellectualize it, right? Like, this isn't working, I don't know why. Right, that's when you can kind of this show, I think, you can kind of come to this, or but people think differently. Janice, Dario, you know Janice Hardy well, but she's like loves thinking about this. If she was here, she'd be like, no, I love to think about this, and we do this, and we share all of our stories, and like, if it works for you, it works for you. I mean, there's the author component to it.
That's the mark of a professional, is when you sense that something's not right.
Yeah.
And we all, because we're all inherently lazy, and we say, okay, well, it's almost right, and we'll let it go. And it keeps you up, and you say, fuck, I've got to go back and fix it. And I liken it to the heart surgeon who says, that artery's only leaking a little, we can let it go. That's unprofessional. And we've all been there. It usually has to do
We've all been there, yeah.
That difficult scene. Oh, I just want to be done with it. And but
here's the terrible story that a writer told me a few years ago. He said, I finished whatever book it was that just came out, and And he said, you know what, though? The day it came out, I figured out what would have made it a really good book. Oh, talk about stabbing yourself in the heart. Oh, man. The artery was leaking and he had a deadline, obviously, and
Let it
it
go.
had to be good enough. But
Right.
what a tragedy.
Ow.
Amen. So actually, I think that's perfect. So let's transition to the parking lot. So we've been at the bar drinking all this time, for the writer's takes, right? I mean, so there's that, right? So there's the I need to get this done. But that's a really interesting one, actually, as you said that, and that looked almost like an old fashioned, John. I'm gonna come back to
Actually, it's a glass of bourbon.
What kind of bourbon?
This is Baker's Mart.
Oh, okay. I got a bunch of really fun West Virginia bourbons when I was there last.
I have Black Draft. I have anyway. Yes, go ahead. I have others.
You got Swill Dog?
No.
Okay. All right. We're gonna talk about this offline. We're gonna take the bourbon conversation to the parking lot. But getting back to the writer stakes of it, right? Is that there's the timeline, right? If you have a deadline, right? There's that stakes. You have that's the ticking clock, right? The very cliched kind of stakes thing.
How very Hitchcockian.
Right. Like, here's our ticking clock. You have this time to do it. But that writer's experience, right? Like, and sometimes we have a literal deadline. Sometimes we have a deadline for ourselves. So like I had mentioned, and I've talked about this on the show that as about June, I've been writing podcasting here full time, right? And that's fine. Like I'm lucky enough that my wife is a much smarter and better human than I am, that I can take this chance and go do these things, and she should be completely fine with it. I, as a human, am not fine with that never being something I can contribute monetarily to the family, right? And in a real way, right? So and so all the stuff I've been doing, I've been like, okay, I finished this crazy story, Pirates of Appalachia. Like, no one ever asked for an epic absurdist satire. I know that, but that was the absolute thing I had, like, my soul had to write. Like, I had actually told her, I was like, there was this weird feeling, it's the only story I've ever had this with, that I have to write this before I die. So now that I've written that, I'm like, whatever, I can die. Like, I'm fine.
Did you just say Roten? You just said Roten.
Roten. I did say Roten.
That
you just said Roten.
Yeah, I caught that.
Thank
Your
you.
West
Thank you for
Virginia
pointing
roots
that
are
out.
showing, buddy.
Morgantown, baby, Morgantown. But yeah, so there's that aspect of the stakes we put on ourselves, and then the stakes that we signed up for, right? If you have a deadline, you sign a contract. You have a deadline. There's professional stakes to it. So, I think basically all of that's a long-winded way to open up. Let's kind of talk about writing the stakes as they pertain to writers. So anyone that wants to jump in, let's talk about it.
I think it's a curse. I think that perfectionists particularly have no business writing because it just kills creativity. And I think one of the biggest tricks to learn is to sideline the perfectionist and say, just get the damn thing.
The parking lot
write,
progressions.
just do it. Just don't even think about it. Just do it. Later, you can think about it, but now is not the time.
Right.
And I think really giving yourself that permission and meaning it, not just saying it, is critical, important. At least it is to me, because I never know what I'm doing. So if I can't suspend that critic, that sense of needing perfection to happen, I'm going nowhere. So for me, the stakes of doing not just a decent job, but a really, really good job are sky high. And I fight that all the time. And it's a trick I've learned over 40 years of writing. And I still, every time I sit down, if I haven't been seized by a wonderful thought, I have to just lower the stakes. Whatever you do today, you do, and you can fix it later. So for me, it's an issue. That's why the word stakes to me meant my own, what I impose on my work.
Right.
I think writing is about grunting through. It's like anything else. I've been with my publisher now for 26 books, I think. So the book I'm writing now is the lead title for May of 2026 for the publisher. So that means that they have already scheduled the print run for whenever that's going to happen, which means they've also scheduled when the copy editors are going to do their thing that have cleared their decks, which then means that the marketing department knows when they're going to send out the advanced readers copies in order to get so I am part of a factory.
Yep.
And my role is really important to making the factory run. And
Okay.
I'm well compensated to turn out stories of a high quality. Now, so far, knocking wood, I've never had to make that choice. I have never once turned out a story that I wasn't proud of in order to meet the deadline. And I have never, there's some wiggle room. There's a week, if you need that, but that's, there's a little bit of wiggle room. I signed a contract. I pledged my honor to get a high quality product out at a certain time, and they are trusting in me to be a professional to get a high quality product out there. Hard stop. That's the job. Now, having said that, have there been a couple of times where I think, oh God, that would have been so much better ending? Yeah, but it didn't occur to me at the time, and there you go.
Let's go.
That's the way it goes.
So,
but that's what professionalism is.
Yeah. Yep.
Amen.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, and I think even as an indie writer, right, there's a level of professionalism you need to have, with it, right? So if you're going to release that book, maybe you don't have to release it by July, right? Because there's an apparatus waiting for you. But there's people that are expecting quality content, waiting for you. So maybe you don't have the time, but you have the quality, same quality requirements. So Dario, so I know you ran, it was Panverse, right? The publishing and print you did for a while, and I know you helped tons of indie writers. On the indie side, how do you feel about the stakes of it? Because so to a degree, I could see like as someone that's done both, right, and like very purposely so. And actually, I've had this show has been a real God bless for me because I get to talk with everyone, right? So like people that are like wildly published traditionally, and people that have been great successes with indie. But with indie, right, there's also that aspect of it is that there's no apparatus around you if you fall, right? Like you're falling, there's no net there, like you're hitting the ground, and that's it, right? So do you have any insight as far as like writing the stakes as far going on the indie route?
I'm going to answer this in my capacity as a past publisher or micropress rather than an author. As you know,
Sure.
I've only published 2 novels and a few short stories. But as a micropress publisher of old, I published three anthologies of novellas, science fiction novellas, as you know. And I also, back in the day, published 4 novels by other authors. The stakes are, it's always perfectionism. I'm with Diane, or quality. And perfectionism doesn't mean, backtrack a bit. One of the best reviews ever on one of my anthologies said, these stories are all flawed, but they're all flawed in really interesting ways. I was picking up novellas that were typically bounced by big publishers and the big science fiction magazines, and they weren't bounced usually because they weren't good. It's because novella space back in the day when print was king was at a premium. So I'd
Sure.
usually get the things that have bounced everywhere. But they were all good. So quality is always an issue for me, and readers' expectations, and that applies as a writer as well. You want your readers to be happy. You want them to like what you've done. You want to feel you've given it your best. There's one of the things as an indie is, you can have regrets, or I know people who go back and change books they've already published. Indie authors who go back and tweak and fix things
Sure.
they wish they'd got right at the time. I've been tempted by that sometimes. I think in that case, my feeling that you don't go and tamper with the work that's done overcomes my feeling about the stakes. I have no stakes. I mean, my stakes they're my own rather than my readers. They're to do with my self-respect and my view of myself as an author, I guess.
Sure.
And right now, my stakes have shifted. They're, I've been stuck for a long time, because I do exactly what Diane was talking about. And Diane knows me well. She knows this. I am a perfectionist, and I find it very hard to turn off the editor long enough to write. So my stakes are astronomical. If I can't, if a page doesn't look right, or a paragraph doesn't look right, or halfway through the first draft, I feel that I'm getting into a mess, I completely forget the fact that I get to rewrite and revise until it's right. I'll freeze. So stakes can be really high if you're a perfectionist and you have high expectations of yourself.
Dario, is this a decision you make at the end of the paragraph or at the end of the draft?
Pretty much. I've always written really, really clean first drafts, and I tend to edit as I go. Kurt Vonnegut, I think, was the ace at that. When he finished a page, it was ready to set in print and type. But yeah, I tend to edit as I go, and I tend to start each writing session rereading at least a few pages of what I've done, so I can easily get stuck and get in a mess. I find it very hard to turn off that critical faculty.
Sure. I wonder how much
I need help, John. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll put you guys in contact after this, but I really, really wonder how much the whole I wrote something, like there's so much apocryphal, like, oh, this writer, he wrote it on the subway on the legal pad and it was perfect, and then that just got published. I just wonder how much of that's actually true, right?
Okay,
Even with Vonnegut, which is I'm a big fan of, how much was it perfect? Or that, like, when I write, I constantly go back and I do adjust, like you were saying, I look at what I was writing, but as I'm thinking and I'm writing, I'll go back and kind of adjust this and I'll kind of keep going. But I'm not stopping, right? I think that's a natural progress, but there's this like, oh, this genius, Shakespeare wrote all his plays in 2 weeks. You silly subhumans.
I was good friends for a while with a really good science fiction writer, Joe Haldeman. He wrote The Forever War. That was his major work. He wrote longhand, and I know this for a fact. Every one of his books was written longhand, and he had beautiful calligraphy, and he wrote very, very nicely in really nice blank books. And when he was done, his wife Gay would type up the manuscript, and his revision was in the low percent. Hardly anything would change.
So
right out the gate.
How much was she revising it?
Not nearly as much as Tolstoy.
Were you there when she was revising it? And even if it was low percent, right? Like, we all think differently. But I think like you always hear that, right? Okay, oh, he wrote it perfectly. His wife wrote it up. Is his wife the editor that like took that from her first draft? And then when he looked at it, it was like, oh, look, this looks good. Thank you, honey, for taking the
writers I
drunken
admire,
spewings here,
The writers I admire and wish I were are the ones who can turn out a first draft without ever looking back and without pausing. I've seen first drafts without punctuation in them. I wish I could do that, because you can fix
That's hubris.
Sorry?
That's hubris. That is, I believe, without punctuation, all of that is projecting, that is making other people's lives harder. And that's unprofessional. I really do. And I would tell you that, my story is one of the apocryphal ones. By Nathan's Run, first book went out, $2 million, sold, bestseller around the world, movie rights, all that kind of stuff. And it was stunning, like beyond stunning. And then it came time for the second novel. And so what, okay, it's a good book, but let's be honest, it's not that good a book. No book is that good a book.
Sure.
And so you have that creative constipation that happens, sophomore syndrome.
Right.
And God bless her, it's my wife Joy who sat, I'm kind of like, shit, what do I do with this? And she said, well, maybe they just like the way you tell a story. And that was like the dawn of a new day. It's like that sunrise coming over the horizon, that really it's about voice, it's about worldview, it's about storytelling, and it's not about perfection. It's not about the comma. It's not about what things look like on the page. It's about that communication with the reader. And having said that, I hope I never think about it actively while I'm writing, because that will create more constipation.
Constipation's a good word.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that thank you so much for John. I think that is the brilliant part, is that it's that connection. You're trying in this weird alchemy way to make a connection with another human at some indefinite time and place down the line, right? They're going to read your words. Meet. Yeah. And if you focus on that connection, is that, and I think about this a lot, because I think, like, when I'm reading, like, I don't think so much, point of view, all of that. That's why I said I throw all of this, everything we talk about on the show, I throw out. I don't think about it all when I'm writing things. And then, unless I have a problem, maybe I'll think about it. But mostly, like, even then, I still just try to feel my way through it. But it's all about making that connection. And if you worry about how this writer did it or that writer did it, how do you do it?
Yeah.
Like, who cares how anyone else does it? Make a draft, use Scrivener, use this. Like, who cares?
I think
you have a process that works for you.
Writing comedy, we are an insecure lot. And it's not all happy and fun and games, but I find that if I think too much about it, it's not going to come out near as well as if I just write it out and look at it later. Because if I'm looking at all the nuts and bolts, the nuts and bolts aren't funny.
Amen.
So,
I mean, maybe they could. Like, we can
and
come up with
I
a
think
joke.
John is right that if you look at something, you go, man, this is a piece of shit. And then you come back to it a couple days later and you look at it and you go, it really does have some redeeming qualities. I just need to tweak a few things on this and it works. But gosh, the stakes are high, because you're not, especially with comedy writers, you're not going to please everybody. You're going to please a small percentage of people, because not everybody thinks like I do. So you kind of lay it all out there on the line and lay things naked and bare and come back and cover it up later,
So Sue, forgive me, I'm not familiar with your work. We were just meeting here, of meeting, this way. The comedy you write, are you writing stand-up? Are you writing comedic books? What are you writing?
Books.
Okay.
Books.
All right. You are writing in my terror space. Okay. There's humor in my books, but it's ironic humor, kind of went off. how do you
That
do you know
I'm
if
a,
it's funny?
because I'm a 12-year-old boy at heart.
Okay. Okay, so
And
so you like
I've never grown
farts and
up,
you like,
and I
there's general humor. But what's the if I try to be funny,
uh,
I'm fucked. It
yeah.
just falls flat, right?
Yeah.
So how do
And if,
you
you know what,
Sure.
we're exact opposite twins, you and I.
okay.
Because if I try to be super serious, I could pull my hair out. I'd look like you.
Hair. It always comes back to hair.
And and it can't be one
Sure.
solid running joke for 300 pages either, so there has to be some
Right. You have to have that
space
balance.
in there, or you
Well,
just
what I think, like,
exhausted.
and Sue, I appreciate, because I just finished. I was going to send you a note. I've just been so busy this week, but I just finished Justified Murder of Crows
Oh, good.
this week. So, and I appreciated it, of course, and thank you for writing it, and I enjoyed it. But I think we're very similar in this respect, is that when you're writing something humorous, right, at its core, right? So like Pirates of Appalachia is a satire. I think sometimes people conflate satire with funny all the time, right? That's not always the same thing. But if you write a satire, you want it to be funny, right? You want there
Mhm.
has to be some humorous moments, or you feel like you failed. But I think do I find it funny? Right. So it's
Right.
like when you come back to it, like that coming
Right.
back to it like a month later, and I don't remember the punchline as I read through it and go, oh, and then I laugh or something, and my
Right.
family thinks I'm crazy because I'm over by myself giggling at
God, me too.
myself.
Yeah,
So
me too.
when you're
And there's,
writing comedy, do you imagine
Yeah.
your audience guffawing, if that's a verb, like laughing out loud? Do you envision them smiling and chucking
I don't
periodic?
envision them at all. Fuck them. I'm just right. If I think it's funny, then I'll come back to it. If it's still funny tomorrow, then maybe I have a winner. And if I'm really insecure about it, I'll run it by Dario. And if he doesn't laugh, I know I have a winner.
Amen. Amen. God love you, Sue. And so anyone watching, I know we switched streams, and we're less, but anyone that has a question, feel free to ask it now.
Oh, God.
I did have a fun thing. So I was very excited about this. If I've kept you guys 6 minutes past what I asked for, and I know some of you are on the East Coast, do you guys have another 10 minutes that I can ask some shots questions?
Oh my God, is
And
it
then-
9 o'clock already? No, I have
Oh.
Is everyone ready for shots? And then as questions come in, I'm going to keep an eye on them, and then I will ask them, and we'll bring them up if anyone wants to chime in, or if anyone watching, you have comments, throw them in. It doesn't have to be a question. I don't even like questions. I'm very was it Socrates? Like you just say what you're
Socratic.
thinking, and we'll reply. Yeah, the Socratic method. Thank you, John. So everyone's ready. We have shots questions.
Give me
All
one
right.
single shot, would you?
John has bourbon there. We got to finish this. You can't see mine. I have my wooden cup because
Yeah.
I'm
It's
Diane
iced tea.
has
I
whis-
know, you're cheating.
Diane has whiskey as well. We were
I
talking.
do. Well, it's dregs. It's dregs, but I'll take it.
Oh, do you need to get
I'll take it.
another?
It's okay.
If you need to get
It's got
another,
maple
we'll
syrup
probably-
in it. It's not real whiskey.
All right, so let's start with our shots, and in between shots I'm going to check audience questions. So anyone that has one or comments, throw them in. I'm gonna get between, and if you want to comment on the shots, let us know. So better use of stakes: vampire hunting, keeping your tent secure in a position, or medium rare with a baked potato. John, you can start us.
Really? Medium rare, baked potato, and corn on the cob, wrapped in foil on the grill.
Oh,
with
very
butter
good, very
inside.
good. Yeah, I like that. And Dario, you want to take us from there?
Tent stakes are really, really important. And, God help you if you're camping on rocky ground, because, You know, sometimes you can get them in at an angle where the soil will hold them down. But,
Right.
you know, you camp in the high Sierras, you're on rocky ground, and stakes are really important. You essentially need, you know, something like titanium ones that will go through anything.
Sure.
I've
When
had
you're
a
going
10
up what's the cliff at not Yosemite.
Half
Is
dome.
Yosemite?
after
Half
The
dome, half
Tetons.
dome's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
I had a tent blow down in a storm in Wales once when I was a teenager, and it was horrific.
yeah.
First
Very
time
good.
in my
Well said,
life I've
John.
ever heard the phrase, I had a tent blow down once in Wales. Never. It's one of one.
1 of 1. This is
You
what
know,
we're going
I could
for
edit
tonight.
that, John. You know, once when I was in Wales, a tent blew down around my ears.
Still one of one.
Very good.
Tent
Very
and Wales.
good.
That's it.
Diane, you want to take us from there?
What was the first choice?
The first choice. What was the first choice?
Vampires,
Vampire
I think.
hunting.
Vampires.
Say it again.
So better use of stakes.
Right.
Vampire hunting, keeping your tent secured.
Well, vampire hunting, clearly. I mean, if you don't have a stake, you're screwed. So it's essential equipment. And as one who's rarely prepared, I would say that would be one I should be prepared with. Easy.
Very good. Thank you for that. And Sue, you want to finish this off?
I would go with the steak and potatoes. Namely, I think I like my steaks like I like my books. I'd rather have a little fillet that's really, really delicious than this great big old half a slab of a cow that is tough and horrible. So I can kind of
Sure.
relate to that and I'm hungry.
Amen. Amen. I also
So you're
haven't had
more
dinner.
Richard Bach than you are Stephen King. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Right. Amen. Amen. All right. So if you could go back in time and witness one historic event, what would it be and what would you bring back with you? So, because Dario, you look completely perplexed as you look off to my right as we look at the screen. Let's start with you.
Oh no! Oh my God! You know the choice. Wow, one historic event. I need more time. Someone else needs to take this.
All right. Who's ready to
known
go?
for being
Anyone jump in?
decisive.
All right, Diane, you jump in.
The sinking of the Titanic, gotta have it. I would live through it. I would be one of the ones who
Right.
would pick
Sure. Sure.
but it would be the sinking of the Titanic. And what would I bring back? My life. I would live and would bring that back with me.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, the Queen Mary is down the road from me. My wife and I stayed at the Queen Mary in October, so 5-ish months ago. And it's bigger apparently than the Titanic was, but it gives you that same feel, and it's super. Queen Mary is super haunted, so that's another section. So, Sue, you want to take us from there?
I think I'd go back. Do you know that story that Bill Gates started Microsoft in the garage?
Right.
I think I would find him and ask him if he wanted a couple $100 and just to remember.
Right.
All right.
And you would take back with you the stock.
Yes.
Okay. John, you want to take us from there?
The signing of the Declaration of Independence, Independence
Okay.
Hall, which actually happened around July 12th or 13th, the actual, signing, not that great big one that didn't happen for another 2 years, but and either a pen or an inkwell. I'll take a pen. A pen, I will take Thomas Jefferson's pen.
Very good. Very good. That's a good one. All right. All right, Dario, are you ready now?
Well, I'm never ready. I'm really known for being
Perfectionist
decisive.
working.
This is your first draft, Dario. Your first draft
It is-
right here.
You mean
Tomorrow to be, oh no, I should have done.
But the stakes. My whole self-image and reputation are on the line here. I think Probably Liberation Day in Europe of World War II. That would have been a place to be. Yeah.
Sure. And what are you bringing back with you?
Oh, can I have another 10 minutes on that?
That's it, because VE Day
Yes.
happened there's VE Day, like, okay, we surrender, but the liberations happen city by city. Right?
Well, that's true. I'm thinking VE Day.
Okay.
VE Day.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. So, and I thought really long when I wrote this. I was like, what would I do? I want to make sure I give back as well. And this is really profound. I thought really hard about this, and I would go back to the infamous Marilyn Monroe dress incident. And she walked over and it blew up, and like she had to hold her like white dress down, and I would bring Marilyn back with me, and not because I want Marilyn for myself, it's for the people. I'm
and you're below the
man.
great, aren't you?
And I bring her back for the people, so everyone can have Marilyn Monroe. I'm still happily married, but I'm there. Yeah, I'm there when it happens.
That's a great one.
Let's see. I think we have a comment. Let me get it. Would you? So let me ask this. So I'm going to skip the last question I had. Would you rather drown in the Titanic incident, or implode searching for the Titanic? So there was that submersible.
Oh,
do you want to be on the Titanic or the submersible?
I'd implode, because you wouldn't know it. If you're, if you're going down on the Titanic, you have time to contemplate the fact that you're likely to die in the next, 20 minutes.
And be stinking cold.
Yeah, good question.
I totally.
The question sucks. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dario.
No, I want to be on the Titanic with the band and the romance.
Sure, you get to hear the violin.
Sure.
And
I've always been I want to hold on to the very last second.
I don't know. I want to be
the guy with the
room.
PlayStation controller telling me this is cool. Like I've seen my son with the PlayStation controller as we try to play games, and he's getting frustrated that it doesn't work. I don't want that controlling me in my last moments. So,
Sue, you were saying something.
Oh, I suppose I'd rather be in the boiler room with Leonardo DiCaprio. But the implosion would be a lot easier than freezing to death on a little raft.
Yeah.
Right. Amen.
See, there's a third option. There's always a Kobayashi Maru solution,
Amen.
where you can. I don't believe, and this is actually true. I mean, this is true. There's always a third option to two negative options. Always.
Sure.
We're not always smart enough to find it, but it's always there. That's the one I go for.
Right,
so what would it be? What's that third option?
I don't know. It's hijacking your raft so that I don't have to drown. Concentric circles, right? So
right.
I pushed you off of the floating raft, and I bring me and my family onto it. And I go, I'm sorry, I feel really bad about this, but
John, you feel free to come down to the boiler room with me and Leo.
No, I don't. I'm not boiled to death. Now, maybe with Kate, but not with Leo. I don't. He's a girl.
I mean, it's hard to say who was more attractive in that movie. The Leo's or Kate. I don't know.
Although there's a great line in that where they're climbing up the steep deck, and you have the priest who say, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, hey, can you walk a little bit faster?"
Very good. And as Solo points out, they're both bold adventures. So and we like bold adventures on this show. So very last question, and I want to, before I ask it, I have to say this very sincerely to the four of you. Thank you so much for going on this adventure with me. I am sorry it started off so rough. You know, Titanic started off nice and it hit an iceberg. I think we sailed past the iceberg. It's just, but getting off to the start was really
You
rough.
apologize too much, Bill. This has been a
Yeah.
fun time. It's the first of many, and there was a glitch. Shrug it off. It's been a good time.
Amen.
Amen.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
guys so
you,
much
Bill.
for that. And so let me ask the very last question here for the group. And if you are watching online, God bless you too, and thank you for sticking with us. Fact or crap? Podcast have officially peaked on this podcast at precisely this moment. What says you, Dario?
I missed the first part of the question. I'm sorry. Can you go through it?
Podcasts have peaked right now. Like everything has peaked at this moment. The podcast version of life.
And it's fact or crap, right,
It's
Bill?
fact or crap. Yeah.
I don't think I've drunk enough.
Anyone that wants to jump in,
Come on
fact or
over.
crap.
Okay.
What's
I'll
he
take this
talking
on.
about?
Go ahead. I'm going Kobayashi Maru on this.
Okay.
You're not. There's a third option. I think that podcasts are the future of media. I think that podcasts are going to edge out cable television. They've already edged out cable news. This is real people talking to real people, and I think you're doing a terrific job on what you're doing, bringing personalities together, such as we are. God bless you. And, but you know, there's an opportunity for in this case readers or other writers to interact with writers, but you've got it with politicians, you got it with athletes, with everything else. I think podcasts are the future of media. I think you're at the point of the sword, and you're doing very well. And no, you have not peaked.
Oh, thank you. I like that Kobayashi. I can't even say it. My dad was a huge Star Trek fan. So as a quick aside, and he worked very hard. He commuted. We're LA. He was commuting crazy hours. And God love him. He'll probably watch this show. So besides the fact that I don't know if he would or not, but God love him for all his sacrifices over the years. But the time we would get to spend time together, because he was so tired from commuting, and then he was an aerospace engineer, you know, being an aerospace engineer and commuting back to through LA traffic, was Star Trek movies. And so I vividly remember that was Star Trek 2, right? When the with Wrath of Khan was where they got into it. Yeah. The Kobayashi Maru. I can't say it. I've also been drinking because I'm a method host. I've been drinking as we talk.
What's her name? Kirstie Alley, who is the
Kirstie Alley. Yeah,
yes,
she was there.
yes.
She was there. Very good. Awesome. So Diane, Sue, you guys want to go from there?
Oh, this has been great fun. I think the whole thing has been fact, not crap. I don't know. We're getting giddy. So
We are.
listening to people kind of talk
Yeah.
over each other and giggle. This may be the pinnacle, but I choose to think the whole thing was brilliant.
Very good.
Well, I hope it's not the end, because, you know, you give me the best excuse to drink, and it makes me super happy to be here.
Amen.
Long may you run. I don't know. I'm almost out of medicine, so I don't have a friggin' clue what I'm talking.
Okay, now I got it. Totally fact. Totally not peaked. You're just attaining escape velocity, man.
Yeah. Amen. Awesome. Well, so thanks so much to the four of you on the show. For the folks watching, thanks so much for making your way over to us. We'll iron it out more as we go. But this was I love it. I do this. I say it's a labor of fun. And it really is. That's why I don't stress about it so much. I want to give the best thing we can give, and give something meaningful as we go. But thanks so much, guys. And I know it's late for you, so
oh my God, it's 9:25. Oh, Jeez. We we got to go bring the cows in. Oh, it's terrible.
Well, may all the
What do you
light.
think? I mean, it's just it's not. It's really not that late. It's just it's evening.
It's
Even in
evening.
West Virginia, there's like a nightlife. I'll go on and watch whole programs after this. It's not that fucking late, dude. It's just not. So, but okay, go
I don't
on with your
know.
little
I don't know
thing.
about
But
you,
it's only
John, but
9:25.
Time to write a couple of thousand words before.
Oh, Jesus.
On another
Christ.
note,
I
I've been
love you so
wiggling
much,
into my
John. Thank you
pajamas for
for
the
like
last hour.
my graciousness. Thank you for hammering it home so much. That actually that feels good to the heart. Thank you.
May your
Awesome.
podcast always be as full of laughter as this one. It's very cathartic
It's been a
for
great
writing.
Very good. Awesome. So good night all. Thank you so much.
Good
I
night,
will
dear.
let's see if you guess. Look, okay. Thanks, guys. I'll be in touch. And we'll go from there. Thanks so much.
That
Have a good
sounds
night.
great.
Thanks
Good
so
night.
much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Great
everyone.
meeting you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, John.